Hi, everyone. 2.5 years ago, Remy Berthaud and I had the idea to create a conference dedicated to open source businesses. We're now preparing for the third edition of Open Source Founders Summit and started this video series to showcase the kinds of conversations between leadership and open source companies that happen at the event. If you would like to be part of the conversation, you should join us May 18th and 19th in Paris. Welcome, everyone, to this first edition of the video podcast in preparation for Open Source Founders Summit. Today, I'm chatting with Anais and Kevin from, respectively, Grist and Passbolt. And we are going to, and I'm Emily, your host. And I want to start out actually with a quick introduction from each of you.
Okay. I'm Anais. I'm
Anais.
co-CEO at Grist. We're building a low-code spreadsheet app. It's basically a low-code platform that feels like a spreadsheet.
Kevin?
All right. Yeah, my name is Kevin. I'm co-founder and CEO at Passbolt. So Passbolt is an open source password manager for teams, and we are used roughly by 50,000 organizations worldwide.
Excellent. Thank you. So the first question I wanted to ask both of you, and let's see, since Anais, you started with the introduction first, we'll start with Kevin this time. Kevin, how do you think about building an open source growth flywheel? How does the open source component fit into building a growth flywheel in general?
Sure. So first of all, I think when we built Passbolt, we built a flywheel almost by accident. We are not thinking, okay, let's build a flywheel, right? We just built a product and started putting it online, and the flywheel appeared by itself. But obviously, we had to observe the metrics and the adoption rate initially. And from my opinion, launching an open source product is very close to what PLG companies are doing, in the sense like you need to create value first. This is what most projects are trying to do with their community version, right? They try to solve a real pain point and create this value first for their users. The value has to be so great that when the product is adopted, it creates a aha effect. It creates some user delight. And once you manage to do that, then the flywheel starts working on its own, in the sense users are happy. When they're happy, they go online, they start talking about it, which brings more users. And there you are. You have your first community flywheel.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I think the point that I wanted to make was the flywheel itself is kind of the same between open source and closed source. The difference is the open source community culture is really a benefit because people want to kind of stand out in that community. They kind of want to be known. We have a Discord server and the regulars, everyone knows them and likes them, right? So I think sometimes with closed source software, you'll still have people who are excited about it, but maybe there's fewer. Maybe there's a certain cynicism you need to get past. That just isn't there in an open source community if you're providing real value, to what Kevin was saying. But the other thing is you can't just sit back and wait for this to happen. It will if you have a good product. But I think one of the most successful things that we did last year on the community engagement side was we did a virtual GristCon. And we invited those community users that we know to speak, to show off what they have been building in Grist. So it wasn't us, so it was just legitimate community members, people that other people have seen in the Discord already, just sharing that. And what's been cool about that is those have become sales assets. I'm talking to someone, they want to build something, and I'm like, oh, we have a recording because we recorded all of those sessions. Look at it. And on the flip side, when I've had people come talk to me in a sales conversation, a lot of times people will come having already built a proof of concept in Grist, which is cool. And those proof of concepts have gotten way more advanced for two reasons. One, AI, but two, that the GristCon videos. People will say, oh, I saw this in this specific GristCon video. So then they knew they could do that in Grist, and then they built it. So in that way, you really have to seize it to get the user-generated content in the form that's useful to you. No one was going to sit there and make videos doing these showcases until we did a conference.
I would agree to that, and I would maybe also add that what you are saying resonates with the importance of having a very clear messaging, being able to nail exactly what pain points you are fixing with your product. And both of our products are working very horizontally, like cross industries, which means that the pain point you will fix in one industry might not be the exact same pain point in the other industry. Hence, you need to be able to nail this messaging cross industries, addressing them one by one, and that's part of the difficulty. But once you are able to communicate clearly what it is that you are fixing and what value you can deliver, if people can understand that in a few seconds, then they will want to try. And then if your product is good, this is the beginning of your flywheel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what metrics do you track in order to see if the flywheel is working or not?
Anais, you
Yeah.
want to start? Yeah.
I think it's kind of, again, it's a little, in some ways, when you're thinking about the business side, what I really care about is sales qualified leads on target. And I'm trying to see that as a percent of, as my installations grow, as my usage grows, how much of that is turning into the kinds of users that then I'm targeting on the revenue side, which isn't everyone, right? And to what Kevin was saying, uh, yeah, that thing where you have a tool that's very kind of general purpose or across industries. That's why I say that on target, I might get leads that like might excite any salesperson, but if it doesn't match certain things, I know that's a hard sale, even if the account is cool on paper, right? So that part is really important. Like, how do you really focus on the opportunity within this wider community that's really far ranging?
In our case, we have separated our flywheels in two. So we have the community flywheel and we have the revenue flywheel. So community flywheel, what really matters to us are the metrics that are top of the funnel type of metrics. So it starts with website visits. Obviously, we'll monitor our SEO. From website visits, then we'll get downloads. From these downloads, we'll get daily active users. And actually, our obsession is really to have this quantity of daily active users that will keep growing, because there is an important metric that we monitor since the beginning of the company. It's the ratio between free daily active users and paid daily active users. And it happens that this ratio has always been the same since we created Passbolt, even as a free open source project without when we just started selling, this ratio appeared and remained stable through time. So we know one thing. We know that if we manage to grow our quantity of daily active users, eventually it will turn into paid daily active users, which means that our revenue will grow. So this is really our first focus. And then obviously to monitor the performance of the revenue flywheel, then it's more standard. So we'll focus on the quantity of MQL generated, then conversion to SQL. Usually in open source, leads are very highly qualified because they are self-qualified, right? They spent a good amount of time on your documentation. They know what they are talking about. Maybe they have already tried the product. Hence, MQL and SQL is almost the same for us. And then obviously middle of the funnel and bottom of the funnel, what matters at the end is MRR, ARR generated, and churn rate. Maybe one note on something we completely underestimated at the beginning of Passbolt is the importance of expansion. So the first year when we started selling, we were a bit disappointed because we were like, yeah, everyone is buying for very small quantity of users, like 2 users, 3 users, 5 users. We'll never be able to grow a company like this. But what we realized though is that 1 year later, the same companies that had initially bought for very low MRR started growing like hell. So the same company with 10 users, then they were like, hey guys, can I have a code for 500 users? And this is when the real revenue started. So in our case now, expansion beats like initial business closing, like big time.
Yeah.
Can you share what the ratio is between your daily active users, free and paid?
Yeah, we are at 14%,
Yeah. That sounds
which is
healthy.
high, which is high for
Yeah,
many.
yeah, that sounds healthy. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to reinforce what Kevin said, that pre-sold where the MQL and the SQL are almost the same. We see that too, right? Like almost everyone, not everyone, but like the ones, when someone comes on a call and they're showing off excitedly the proof of concept they've already built, and they've come onto that call to ask them specific questions. It's like a 1 to 3 month sales cycle, and that tends to be kind of the same, like the MQL SQL thing.
And what do you see as the biggest difference between running an open source company versus running a proprietary software company?
Alice, you want to go?
Well, for me, really, it's the open source values really guides and also in some ways constrains the internal decision making. So, for example, we put in a lot of work to make it really simple to toggle between the community edition and the full edition with all of the proprietary features. Grist is open core, and have that toggle go both ways to really build trust, right? That if so that nobody feels stuck and that it's simple and you don't need to do a whole reinstallation of another version. And that work then makes it possible for us to gain that trust, but also makes it less scary for people to try the full features and then decide whether or not it's worth it for them to pay for it, right? And Grist is pretty sticky, so that's a good bet for us. But that means that future decisions about what is paid and what is not are guided by this and also constrained by this. We have to make sure that your document works in both versions when you hit that toggle. So we have to be very careful about what is or isn't enabled or disabled, right? I don't think proprietary companies have to think about this quite as much, right? And normally, if the free version, it's really just about limits and usage for the most part and some features. They don't have to worry about what happens too much if someone downgrades. And the other thing is, I was thinking about this question was, I kind of see open source companies thinking about like two pies. So every company, like a closed source company, thinks about my product. What percentage of the larger market pie do I have? What is my market share for people who are using this kind of product? Open source companies go, there's now a market around my tool. Other people are making money on my tool in many cases. What is the share that I get? So your market that you're thinking about in open source is also, how do I have this bigger pie around my tool, and then what's the piece of it that I get? I don't think closed source companies think that way, right? They're not here like, I have a tool and I'm going to make some of that money off of that, innovation. And I'd also say that on the other side, a lot of open source companies, and this is like maybe changing, but in conversations that I've had, is they don't even think enough about what is my market share in the whole universe of tools that do this, including competing against proprietary. They tend to think, what's my market share amongst users who are already convinced about open source? And if you shift that to not about open source, but all of it, then you start to behave a little bit more like a typical business, which really helps you become sustainable and grow.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think to bounce on what you are saying, I think one of the difference between an open source company and a more regular company is the fact that you have two different motions to build. And this is where a lot of open source founders, like, I think, like, get surprised while building their company. You first start with your first community product and you identify that there is traction. And sometimes you can have like a lot of GitHub stars, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to monetize this. And then you realize, like, the hard truth strikes you. Okay, I cannot monetize stars easily. Like, I need something to sell. I need a commercial offer. And very often you realize that your commercial offer is going to be completely different for, from your freemium, right? This is not the same pain point you are solving. This is not the same product you're delivering. Hence, you need to think completely differently for your commercial product. It's a different business model almost. So I think this is the first part of the difficulty. And here I'm not even tackling the fact that you don't have proper attribution when it comes to marketing. In open source, you have a huge dark funnel, right? Mainly most open source projects are used on-prem. So when it is installed on-prem, we know that open source users are very privacy conscious. So they are not very comfortable having trackers. So as an open source company, you have to be very attentive to that and not put trackers everywhere, which means you have less telemetry, which means you cannot predict easily what's going to come out of your community flywheel and what's going to convert into a revenue flywheel, which is not constraint that most SaaS products have. This is the first thing. I think an additional point is in open source, we are kind of accelerating the cross the chasm effect because we are more appealing to early adopters. In a sense, you have a lot like in any company, you will have one or two risk takers who will not hesitate to download an open source tool, install it, and start using it. But it is not the same if you are building a SaaS product for which someone from the IT team, if this is your buyer, will need to ask the permission for the CISO because there will be some data transfer between the two platforms, or you will have some compliance frameworks to respect. And open source tools kind of disrupt that by allowing, the end users in the company installing those tools more easily without having the need to ask for the permission. And the classic cross the chasm paradigm that you see where only early adopters and risk takers are adopting the solution, I think it covers more spectrum in an open source setup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Though I'd say from our experience, that's true, where we'll have random risk takers, citizen developer types who just figure out how to do something because they're trying to solve a real problem. They're trying to do it in Grist. But what ends up happening sometimes, you were talking about the expansion, we'll get stuck on the expansion because at some point they'll say, oh, we have to involve IT now to do more. And that does slow things down. So if the expansion doesn't require IT, which we're cooking on ideas on how to do this, but if it doesn't, then it's not a problem. But it's true. As soon as it hits IT, especially at large organizations, which is actually why we don't target blue chip. If they come to us, sure, but we don't target it because those IT departments are near impossible to work with. So we go a bit more mid market, which is still large, where the VP of IT type can approve a five-figure, an annual five-figure contract as a,
Yeah.
to start without having to go through some protracted procurement process. So that's why I'm saying on target, the logos look great on your website, but that was 2 years in some cases, right?
Mm,
Especially because the person who brought it in to solve a pain point, once they solved it, they're not always as motivated necessarily to help you expand. They might feel bad, but like they don't have to if they solve their problem already. So that's been a thing that we've been tackling and trying to get feedback and trying to make that easier.
yeah. In our case, I think we are bridging this with the expansion rate inside the organization. So it starts with one champion, but if we manage to turn this one champion into 100 or 500 users using Passbolt, then that's it. This is established, and somehow we have already built the trust that is necessary to convince the decision maker. Because once you have 500 users that are storing their most mission critical data in one platform and they are using it every day, well, it makes the a very difficult life for the CISO to go and talk to them and tell them, guys, from tomorrow you're not going to use this tool. It's almost more easy to adopt it and to purchase a subscription for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It always depends on the product. For us, it's not necessarily always number of users. It's actually number of use cases. If they're using Grist to only solve one problem, then that problem got solved. As soon as they're solving two, now people are paying attention throughout. Like, oh, we can use this for more things. That really expands the usage much more quickly.
All right, last question. What are you guys most excited to talk about at Open Source Founders Summit in May?
I'm going to have a workshop on the founder's resilience, which has nothing to do with open source and how to do business with open source. But I
Thought it
think
was
this is real hardship, yeah, for many founders. Is like how, because it's easy to start a project and keep doing it for 1 year, but it's much more difficult to keep doing the same thing for 5 or 10 years, which is very often the case for open source products, because it takes time first to build your community product and then to generate revenue and then keep going at it until it really picks up. So how do you keep this emotional wellness? How do you stay good mentally for such a long period of time, with a lot of ups and downs? So I'm gonna talk about my personal toolkit, which I've elaborated 3 years. And obviously it's an open workshop where everyone can come and talk about their own ideas and what they are doing for themselves.
Yeah, I have a bunch of ideas that I've sort of been thinking about. Maybe I'll tease one that I basically just want to talk to other people and see has anyone done this before. Something that we're thinking about doing this year is so for us, the space that we're in, a lot of times we're talking to IT, and the biggest problem is when you're going on prem, you're consolidating costs, right? If someone's using Airtable, those costs are diffused across an organization. They don't know how much their company is spending on Airtable because someone in marketing, someone in operations, someone in finance put down 200 on a credit card, 2,000 on a credit card. All of a sudden they want to go on prem and everything just got consolidated. So something we're saying is, can we give people a way to do a SaaS-like experience on prem? Can I have a minimum cost to give support to IT that feels more or less stable for them, and that makes it possible for end users when they want to use Grist to put down a little credit card? This is the kind of thinking you really need to I want to chop this kind of stuff, right? To really hear what the objections are from IT, and sometimes that's where we get stuck. Is it's just that's a big price tag for one person to eat. So
Nice. I'll be there.
yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
We're gonna talk about all these things. I have other schemes. I call them my schemes. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Both of those topics sound great, actually. Thank you both so much. And that's it. This is a quick podcast. So see you both in May.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Anais. See you
Thank
in
you.
May.